yeah, maybe we could talk about something. I like to get people's opinion on something
Sure.
first. So I have some Tic Tacs here in this box.
Yeah.
And let's just say we can be certain that there are an even number of Tic Tacs in the box.
Okay.
But then someone comes up to the table and insists that there are actually an odd number of Tic Tacs in the box.
Hmm.
And we ask him why, and he just says that it's his truth that there's an odd number. It makes him feel good,
Yeah.
and those are the reasons why he believes that.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? How do you feel?
I mean, I've always felt that everybody's truth and reality is subjective. I don't really subscribe to the whole idea of people sort of having like one base reality and all of us, having our own perceptions. I think that even math and science is like faith in your perceptions, I think, and faith in your senses. So I'm not sure that I would say he was philosophically wrong. I think that, if we counted them and they were even, then he was wrong in that sense. But then you could ask, how does he count? What sort of math does he agree with? Are we really, what is an even number? I mean, you could really break that down. So,
Yeah, like between the three of us believing it's even and him believing it's odd, would one be mistaken and one correct in that sense? Is there a way to be more aligned with truth in general about this?
yeah, I mean, I guess he would be wrong to the general idea of what truth was for most people, but I don't think he'd be wrong for himself.
He wouldn't be wrong for himself?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go through life and feel a certain way about things, if the trees all look red to you and not green, or maybe you have a issue with your mind where the colors change and to you it's always red, like, I don't know,
Yeah, it seems like there's a distinction between the trees actually existing and then
Yeah.
our like perceptions our perceptions of the tree.
Right. But do they really exist? Like, because we're here, we're looking at them,
Yeah,
right?
does our perception impact whether or not the tree actually exists or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, is it actually true that a tree is there? Or like, how does that
Yeah.
relate in any way?
I'm just not totally convinced that anything's there if I'm not there.
Really?
You know what I mean? Like, I get the science behind it, and we're living on this planet or whatever, but maybe we're not. Maybe this is a computer simulation, as much as people have been saying that or whatever. I mean, it's just, we only know what we see and feel and touch and smell and what we're there for, and, even our memories can deceive us. So, right now we're all here enjoying these trees, but if absolutely no human being was ever looking at this, no cameras, no satellites, nothing, I mean, do we really know the trees are here? I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just do that to kind of get a general sense of how people value truth in general and just how people think about these things.
I guess I don't value truth.
That's cool. But, yeah, so is there a belief you wanted to chat about or to question?
Yeah, I guess I think it's kind of weird now that everybody's getting really political. I mean, I understand why they're getting political. They're really upset about what happened with the election, or they're really for it. But it just seems like everybody's being apathetic on both sides in a lot of ways. I think that Facebook and social media has really caused a lot of people to start to, I don't know, put up a Gandhi quote or, a whatever fake news, and just to support their ideas, and they feel like they're, participating in society and in politics, whereas there's actually people going out and trying to change other people's minds. And I think that we've gotten to the point where we're so far away from each other in our ideologies that, if I'm, a liberal living in Los Angeles and I say that, I think some of Trump's policies are okay, like that could be a death sentence for someone's career, or possibly, you can't sort of be middle of the road anymore. And I feel like that's really terrible. If I meet somebody and I disagree with them, even if they're really conservative, or even if some of their stuff might be construed as hate speech, I'd rather talk to them about it if they're being civil. And I just think that seeing the way people are shutting down free speech, even if I don't agree with it, and yet not bringing anything to the table that brings people together, it's just getting really divisive.
Yeah, that's a very hot topic right now is free speech and all the stuff that's happening on college campuses.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Do you think it's true that free speech should be restricted in some sense, or should be open?
I think it should be open. I think who's that quote? I don't know who said it, but I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't agree with, say, I don't know, the alt-right or neo-Nazis or whatever people want to call them these days. But if they want to peacefully march and hand out their horrible literature, I think that's their right to do that. And it's our right to also peacefully march and hand out literature against them. Okay. And I think that, we can all make up our own points, but I don't think that, especially some of these conservative speakers that have been going to Berkeley, like, I don't agree with Ann Coulter. I think she's horrible. I think that, she's doing it for the money. I think she just says things to get people incensed. And I think that protesting her showing up was probably really great for her PR. But she still should have had a right to speak, and be booed out. Yeah. But still had a right to speak, Mm-hmm. I just think I get where the kids are coming from, and I get the importance of safe spaces and trigger words and all this stuff. Like, I get it. But I also think that people need to be exposed to things and ideas that make them uncomfortable to learn to grow, I guess.
Gotcha.
Not feel assaulted, but just, I don't know, I guess that's a fine line, right? I mean, if someone stands up and says, I think all people that are of Middle Eastern descent are terrorists, like, I would feel very offended personally. Yeah. And I would feel like they were hating me. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to ban that person from speaking.
So let's just say someone maybe might disagree with you, and just watching this video now, like, what is the main reason why you believe this is valuable or true, that free speech should be unrestricted?
I think when I was a kid, I grew up in a very white neighborhood, and I'm, a person of color, and so people would ask me questions, they'd be like, why are you brown? Like, when you were a kid, they'd ask, why is your skin color like this? Or are your parents from another country? And, like, the kind of stuff that's maybe not, PC these days to even say to somebody, because it is kind of offensive for someone to walk up to you and ask you what your race is. But at the same time, these kids didn't realize it was hate. They were trying to ask me why I was different, and we were able to have these conversations. So I feel like those conversations are going away now. People are afraid of being racist or afraid of being taken as something, and they don't even talk about it. They don't even ask, like, well, you're Muslim, but what's going on with all this terrorist stuff? Like, why can't we just talk to people about it without, offending them, I guess?
So you're saying this restriction on speech doesn't allow people to have the opportunity to learn about things?
I think so. And I think a lot of people think that, well, it's hate speech, so we don't need to learn about it, and that's it. But I think that, labeling something as hate speech or labeling something as whatever they say about snowflakes and liberals or whatever, like, these labels make it horrible. And I think that some guy can have really terrible ideas and policies on abortion or on gay rights or anything else, but at the same time, they might be something that you agree with them on in other ways. And I don't know. When I was a kid, I had this weird dream when I was in high school, and it was the first time I really got political, and I remember the second Bush was in office, and I hated him, and I thought he was the worst. And I wanted to protest and all this stuff, and I was like 17. And then I had this dream where he was in my dream. We were on Air Force One for some reason, and him and I were playing pool on Air Force One, which I think is kind of weird, because why would you play pool on an airplane? So, and I had this moment with him, and I'm just like, listen, George, like, this is really cool that we're having beers and hanging out, and you seem like a really nice guy, but, like, what's with all the horrible policies? What are you doing, man? And he was like, I'm just trying to do what I can do, and I'm just, I don't know, I just think it's right, but I'm not a bad guy, man. And then I, like, woke up, and I was like, that was really weird. And he probably isn't a bad guy. He probably does, shit and eat like the rest of us and sleep for 8 hours if he can, like,
Yeah, I don't think anybody wakes up thinking they're the villain in the story.
Yeah, going, exactly. So are there really villains? Like, is there really an odd or an even number? Like, what is really, I don't know. I guess, and that's what makes it so hard, is when you start looking at things in such a pragmatic way, and then you meet people that are, like, mostly really set on a certain ideal, and you try to ask them a question about it that maybe they feel like, well, you don't agree with me, that's why you're asking me that. It's like, no, I want to see how you defend your point. I want to, maybe I'll subscribe to your ideas, but, like, I really need to understand why you feel the way you do. And I feel like these days when you do that to people, they think that you're just, I don't know, needling them or trying to bring them down. So
yeah, and I think I agree with all that about free speech. It should be totally unrestricted. Yeah. But maybe we're mistaken about it. Like, is there anything you could find out or learn to change your mind about this? What would you have to find out?
I guess one of the things that I kind of understand why they're doing it is I'm sure there's people out there that have been through traumas that when they hear someone stand up and say, whatever about rape or whatever about sexual assault or, gay rights or whatever, it might trigger them to remember these horrible experiences that happened to them. And the idea that somebody can stand and say something that literally makes somebody go back into that traumatic period of time in their life is really terrible. And that feels like assault to me too. So I get that. So I feel like if my mind was to change, maybe I'd have to meet enough people like that could explain to me, like, look, I get why you don't agree, Ann Coulter should be able to talk, but when she speaks, it makes me feel like this, and I go into this horrible place, but then I would think, well, then just don't go there, but then they would say, well, this is my school. So, and then, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough issue.
It is, yeah.
But thanks, Eric, for the conversation.
Thanks. I guess our time is up. Thanks, man.
Sure.
All right. It's good chatting.
Good chatting, yeah.
Yeah, all right. What are you going to do with this?
I have a YouTube channel where I may upload it. That's cool. It was really good.
Cordial.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right. Good luck.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Other side of that.
Oh, you want to do 5 on the other side?
I kind of do.
You should.
Okay, we could talk about it.
But I need to find it.
Do you get any regulars that come here like every day?
I'm only here a couple times a month.
Oh, okay.
But,
That's good.
but yeah,
Therapy. Just like,
some guy did stop by and was like, "Oh, I see you here all the time. Let me get a card."
yeah.
So that was interesting. So, could I get your first name?
Sure. Rory.
How do you spell that?
R-O-R-Y.
R-O. Okay. All right. Yeah, my name is Reed. Yeah, nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
So yeah, is there any belief you want to chat about?
Well, yeah, just kind of following up on what Eric was talking about, I think it's interesting to think about like that moment where free speech becomes action. Like it's not just words, it's not just, oh, I believe this and that's a personally held belief, but it translates into actions taken that could be harmful. And like this idea that Eric was touching on is like, okay, well, what if someone has experienced trauma and somebody believes something that kind of validates or supports that trauma? Like, for example, if somebody's been raped and then there's a person who wants to say certain things about, victims of sexual assault, and that's really damaging. And then they pass policies that impact victims of sexual assault. Or like on a larger scale with trauma, say someone, hates Jewish people, and then, someone who has, grandparents who died in the Holocaust, like how would they feel about those sorts of beliefs being put out into the world when, they promote hatred against a group of people and then actions are taken that support that belief or that hatred?
Yeah, so you're more worried about the actions that the speech can inspire and bring about?
Yeah, because it is that gray area of like, well, but you don't want to restrict free speech or say that like people aren't allowed to believe what they believe. But where do you draw the line when we're all in community with each other and we have to live with each other's beliefs and maybe the actions that are inspired by those beliefs, Because I don't think our beliefs or our speech sort of live in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I think that our words can create impact and action,
Yeah, like whatever we believe, that's how we act on our beliefs. Any action that we take is usually because of a belief we hold.
Right.
So we should, that's why I'm so worried about truth in general. Is like the more true things we believe, the more likely it is we'll act fairly and just. And the more false things we believe, we might actually cause more harm in society. So that's what I'm kind of doing here, is like trying to figure out, do people value truth? How did they come to the conclusions that they come to believe in things? And I'm trying to, model a way to have conversations about these deeply held beliefs as well.
And this idea of policing language is interesting because I definitely fall on a certain end of the spectrum in terms of my political beliefs. I work at the Trevor Project and a nonprofit, and so I, have a lot of beliefs around LGBTQ advocacy or feminism or whatever.
Yeah.
But even among my circles of activists, there are moments where people behave in unjust ways to each other. We may all know sort of politically correct language or hold sort of like be in the same group or minority group, but we're still capable of hurting each other, or oppressing each other. And so it's really interesting. I don't know if you can just say, okay, well, if we police language and we make sure that everybody says the same thing, we'll all be safe, I think that it's interesting how people are people even when we technically believe the same things.
Gotcha. So you're kind of questioning the idea of policing language in general when it comes to your community?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's the way to make people safe all of the time, Like, if we just stopped people from saying X, Y, or Z. I think what you're saying is like, well, if we could all agree on like a similar truth or similar objective reality, then maybe we could, all agree on that and be better to each other. Is that what you're saying?
A little bit, yeah. I guess. I think so. Cool. Well, that was really great.
Cool.
Thanks for sharing your opinion.
Absolutely.
Good points.
All right. Thanks, guys. Hope to see you around.
I just realized when you're talking about that could really apply to like fake news and stuff, and I don't agree with any of that. So I guess there is an objective truth, because that's the same argument somebody who is making fake news would say, like, well, it's an even odd number to me because, or like, well, that's how I feel about the Russians or whatever, but that's not true. And that's become so dangerous now, man. Like, what is news anymore? That's super important, and there's a concrete truth there for sure.
Totally. Yeah.
But there's a way in which, like they're both true. Like, you can be not objective 100% of the time. Like, I think all people are not objective 100% of the time, and we have to account.
Facts are facts in the media, right?
Yeah.
Like, if he went and, met Putin or whatever, he didn't, or, Flynn took money from whoever, like, it happened. You can't just be like, I don't believe it happened.
Well, apparently you can do that, but...
Social media.
Stuff to think about.
It is. All right, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.